Sitting in for Selena just today and tomorrow. Now, Jacqueline Alnes, as I've told you, was a Division 1 runner during her freshman year in college, but her season was cut short by a series of inexplicable neurological symptoms. What started as a cough escalated, and she collapsed on track and experienced months of unremembered episodes that stole her ability to walk and speak. You could be a member of the Rolling Stones, Jacqueline, with memory loss like that. Good.
That would be probably more fun.
There you go. You're welcome to the program, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. You're in Philadelphia, you tell me.
Yes, I'm just outside of Philadelphia. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. Is this book about doctors and coaches not listening to their patients and the people that they train, or is it a book about remedies, or perceived remedies that just don't work?
You know, it's about both of those things. So
okay.
I'm glad you touched on them. It is in part about not feeling heard by doctors and feeling like, probably like all of us do, when we have mysterious symptoms, any one of us might, if doctors didn't listen, turn to something like Google, which is what I did. And that's where I stumbled. I was very desperate, and I stumbled across a website called 30bananasaday.com, which is as absurd as it sounds. It was a website where the leaders told you to eat 30 bananas a day, every day, and you could heal yourself from literally anything. And so it sounds ridiculous now when I say it, but back when I was at my most desperate, it sounded like a pretty good deal.
All right, let's start, not at the very start, but you were obviously a very fit person. You were Division 1 runner in your freshman year in college, as I said. Then you started to feel unwell. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it started simply. It started with a cough, like you said. And I didn't really think too much of it because, you know, you get sick all the time in college being around other people. And I went to the athletic doctor, who was a doctor for our team, after a few weeks of having the cough. And he prescribed me medication, and I took it, and I immediately collapsed. And after, when I woke up, the world was not the same as it had been before. So it was... I had really blurry vision. Everything was sort of like spinning around me like a surrealist painting. And I, had this feeling of like, what happened to my body? Because I had been previously so in control of it. And as the weeks went on, I kept articulating to my coach and the doctor that things didn't feel quite right, but they kept telling me that it was an allergic reaction to the pills and that I should just kind of keep trying to run and keep pushing through it. But the symptoms morphed into, I started, losing my ability to speak the way I had before. So I would just repeat words for minutes on end. And like you said, I forgot my memory of things. And so it was really, really scary and harrowing experience. And yeah.
Do you mind me asking, where was your family in all of this? Because I'm sure you made your family aware that you were unwell, but the athletic doctor says I'm okay, the coach says I'm okay, or it's just an allergic reaction. Were they not pushing for tests to be done elsewhere or other things to be done?
You would think that I would tell my parents, but...
typical teenager, knows it all.
Exactly, a rebellious teenager. But the thing was, at the time, I really did have trust in doctors and in my coach because I was 18. I was so young looking back. And I trusted these people to keep me well. And so when they were saying I was okay, I really did believe them to some extent because I thought I might just be overreacting or it might just be in my head. And so I told my parents, but I minimized everything. And I did go see doctors off campus as well. And they too said things like, oh, this is temporary. You just have to get through it. You're cleared to run. And so I started really not trusting my own perception of the world as a result.
Wow. That put you in a rather unique spot, didn't it? Not trusting the world.
Yeah, it was really, it's something that I think I'm still working through in some ways, where I think when you're told for so many months and then years that your perception of your body is not what other people see, it's really hard to get back to a place of trust in your body again, I think.
Okay, so you're in a situation where your memory is affected, your walking is affected. And so you decide, okay, they've all told me that it's a reaction. You're obviously having other mental health issues associated with it because, as you said, you didn't trust yourself, you didn't trust the world. So you found this 30 bananas yolk. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I found them at a time when I was very lonely and very desperate. I wasn't able to really live the life of a normal college student because of my symptoms. And so I spent a lot of time in my room alone on the internet, which is never a good equation.
Not healthy. No, no.
The internet is a weird and wild place. And I, at first, thought of the website as sort of a joke. It was funny to me because it was like, there's a cartoon of a cucumber parachuting from the sky. There are usernames like gotta have fruit or I love bananas. Like, it's kind of absurd. Like, it's a little bit, funny to look at and say, like, look at what's out there. But as I looked at it more, there was this page called Testify where people would write in about their experiences. And so there was one, for example, of a woman who had been a former D1 rower. So she was like me, where she had been a really high level athlete and she had gone through years of unexplained symptoms. And then she had started eating fruit and she immediately said she cured herself. She felt younger. She could exercise again. And all these testimonials were like, I don't have acne. I feel amazing. I look young. And anyone wants to hear those kinds of things, especially when you're feeling so sick. So I kind of thought, this doesn't look as bad as I thought it did in the beginning.
Okay. And so you started eating fruit, just fruit?
I did not. So
okay.
I never became a full-blown fruitarian. What happened instead was that I became obsessed with the website. And I followed these people for probably almost a decade, just sort of like a lurker. Like, I was never part of the community, but I just sort of like lurked. And instead of eating fruit, I just sort of developed a pattern of disordered eating because a lot of the website preached things like oil is a toxin and fats will clog your system and cause you to become sick. And it matched my own sense of reality at the time, where I was telling myself I must have done something wrong to get this sick. And so I wanted to take control back. And so food became a form of control, even if I didn't follow an actual fruit diet.
So, okay, so this is worse than I thought. I had assumed that you just went on the fruit diet. It didn't work. You had bad reactions or whatever the case might be, and away you go. But it actually, it's much worse than that because, as you say, you became obsessed with the website.
Yes.
You were digging a hole with a very large shovel. And how did you get out of it?
That's a great way of putting it. I got out of it. What I think is interesting is I think what's interesting to me to think about this fruit diet is that it's like a lot of things that all of us encounter on a daily basis. I don't think it's so rare. I think we're all, especially on social media, preached to about what the best way is to live or how much we should sleep or how many blueberries a day we should eat or, what the best, hottest new life hack is. And so for me, writing this book, it was kind of exploring the phenomenon that all of us encounter, which is how do we treat our bodies well and how do we find out what actually is the best way to live? And so for me, I experienced all of these health issues and I went through this period of really unhealthy, disordered eating. But my real cure in the end was finding true balance and going to see people who had medical degrees or licenses in what they were teaching me. So,
other than having a degree in bananas, yeah.
Yeah, might be helpful to go see an actual licensed nutritionist, which I did in the end. And, she was helpful in helping me understand that equating foods to evil or toxins is not actually the greatest way to figure out what you're going to eat in the day. And so that was really helpful for me.
Now, that was one consumption that you were able to sort out and regulate. But what about your consumption of the internet with this particular website and how your obsession with that went? How did you cure that?
It's a great question, too. I think it was a matter of what happened for me actually was so these people, the 30 bananas a day creators, used to preach that only raw fruit was the way to cure yourself from anything. And a couple years into their sort of diet plan, they started preaching that you could actually eat cooked food, but only after 4 p.m. in the day. Mm-hmm. And so I just started thinking to myself, wait a second, if I really bought into this whole, like, you know, everything about the body, then why all of a sudden are the rules allowed to change? And you're not telling us why the rules are changing. And so that was sort of a wake up call of like, maybe these people don't know as much as I thought they knew. And maybe their relationship with food is not the healthiest. So that was a good wake up call. And then I think also just, I was so isolated at that time and I wasn't able to really have many relationships with a lot of people in my life because I was so isolated to my apartment. But as soon as I left my apartment and got out into the real world, I started realizing like people are messy, life is messy, people have all been through different journeys, and I'm not alone in this at all. And so I didn't need to turn to some weird website to help me. I could actually have relationships with people who could help me heal.
Is there a connection between you beginning to eat right or correctly and having a balance of food in your system that helped you then to awaken to the other issues that you had? Does it come from that balance, do you think, as well as other things maybe?
I think, yeah, you're right on. Everything became about balance for me. I really had such an all or nothing way of thinking for so much of my life, because as a runner, you sort of had to have this mindset of, I'm going to endure pain until it's impossible, and that's how I'm going to run faster. Or I'm going to eat as clean as possible so that I can, you know, help myself heal. And what I started realizing over the years was that everything was happier in my life when I reached a sort of balance with running, finding joy in, you know, going slower on the days I wanted to, in eating and being able to share meals with other people without stressing about it, instead of hyper fixating on these foods that I believed were like good or bad. And so you're spot on. And once I untangled one way of black and white thinking, the rest of the dominoes started to topple too.
Living in your apartment when you were a freshman or just after you were a freshman, did you get through college okay eventually and qualifying and all that?
I did. And I have really great friends that I made who actually read the book last week and they were really excited about it. And so it's been fun to see, so many good things have come out of that time.
I look at you and I see I've got 3 children. The youngest is my daughter, who's 25 in March. And I see her in you because you're bubbly and you're excited and you're full of life. And I see that. But as a parent, I worry that if you can go through what you went through without your parents knowing, how did you bring your parents up to speed? And if you did, how did you resolve that with them?
I did. I think the hard part about illness is that sometimes it's accompanied by shame. And there was something for me in feeling like if I didn't tell another person about it, it wouldn't actually exist. To tell them would mean this is real and it's affecting my life in a deep way. And I didn't want to do that back when I was 18. I wanted to pretend like I could just be invincible and take on the world and do everything myself, because that's what you dream of when you're 18, is being independent. Mm-hmm. And so I did start letting them in more. And that was a journey that was difficult for them and for me, because I had, not told them the full truth from the beginning, but they've always been so supportive. And looking back, and I write this in the book, I wish that my 18-year-old self would have known to call them up and tell them the truth and, from the get-go. But I think that's part of life and learning, is that you're not always as wise as you are at 18 as you might be years down the road.
Well, can I tell you, I was in my local hostelry recently, and I'm 57 nearly, so I'm a lot older than you are. And the gentleman that I was talking to at the time, the 2 or 3 of them there, and I asked them that very question. If you could tell your 18-year-old something, your 18-year-old self something, what would it be? We all struggled with it, because there was so many things to tell. But thankfully, I didn't have the 30 bananas a day story to relate to them.
We all have something, though.
Oh, yes. I have just the equivalent of 30 bananas a day to tell my 18-year-old self. Listen, I'm thrilled to see you laughing and smiling, and I can tell from how you are now that you are balanced, as you said yourself in your, when you talked about balance. Are you still running and keeping fit and all that?
I am.
Good.
And running is so much fun. Yeah, living on the other side.
I wouldn't know. As you can see, I wouldn't know. Well, listen, I wish you well with the book. It sounds like a real kind of an eye-opener. If there was one lesson that you learned from writing the book, because you wrote the book because of all the lessons that you learned, but was there one outstanding one maybe that you learned because you wrote the book?
I think I learned that I am not as alone as I ever thought I was. I thought I was alone in feeling ill. I thought I was alone in feeling shame about food, about running, about failing, these things that I thought I could be good at. And I realized from looking in history and interviewing other people, I was never alone. And people feel the same way as me. And I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people, where once you're vulnerable and tell someone your story, they get it and they're there for you. And so I think that's what I would take away.
Who says you can't put a wise head on young shoulders, huh? Fair play to you. Listen, it's been lovely talking to you. The name of the book is The Fruit Cure, the story of extreme wellness turned sour. Love it. Jacqueline Alnes, thank you for joining us from Philadelphia this afternoon, or this morning, your time. I wish you well, and I wish you further balance in your life right through. And
thank you so much.
And don't be afraid to talk to people. Not at all. Don't be afraid to talk to people and get them involved. And if you've got problems, I mean, that's the big thing going through life, is no man is an island. Look after yourself and have a good rest of the day, won't you?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this time.